to introduce our next speaker. His name is Mr. Larry Bates, and he is the president of Bitland Global. It's an organization that aims to provide individuals and organizations with transparent services.
They're not talking about you, introducing you.
Of land titles in rural areas of the globe. Bitland operations span across many African countries.
Now it's about your company.
Started recently in Ghana and Mauritius. Mr. Larry Bates will join us online through a Skype conference. And he's right now in the USA as a professional earlier. Is Mr. Bates ready to hear us?
Yes, sir.
Yes, in a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a moment.
Great.
You are good to go. Bates, you're live now.
Great. Hello, everyone. I want to thank Mr. Ito for having me and allowing me to speak. It's such an honor to represent Bitland Global here today, and I want to thank everyone who's in attendance. Moving on. So, what Bitland Global is trying to do is address a major issue that has been affecting millions and ultimately billions of people, not just in modern times, but throughout history. What you have with the issue of land property rights is a problem that inherently affects the ability for communities to build wealth together. When you cannot figure out who owns a piece of property, it becomes impossible to establish a chain of custody. What this does is it makes it impossible for communities to combine their wealth and capital in order to build cumulative wealth and use that wealth to build infrastructure as a community. So what we're trying to do is bring systems that can help address this problem using the most cutting-edge technology. So in blockchain technology, a lot of people allude to Bitcoin and remittance payments. Well, what Bitland is trying to do is take that technology and apply it into the real world. What you have is an opportunity for the modern cutting-edge technology to be taken from digital space and applied into physical space. Moving on. So in many countries, pardon? In many countries, what you have is outdated or incomplete regulatory frameworks for developing land titles as a common unit or as a government. So what we're trying to do is establish a digital land registry that can be applied in different areas, whether it's a developing country or a country that is first world, even though first world countries have regulatory frameworks, they also suffer from many of the same issues as even developing areas. So in areas like the United States even, you have places like Detroit that suffer from the same issues as rural Ghana because there's not enough government infrastructure to get to all the areas in which that need to be serviced. Moving on. Specifically in Ghana, the government records have not been up to date. There have been a lot of problems within the government infrastructure that have made it difficult to establish a national working land register. It's not for lack of trying, it's because over the last 20 years, there have been problems accessing the populations, whether it's because of lack of trust or lack of ability to apply the capital, that the government has not been able to actually accomplish their goals. So roughly 78% of the land in Ghana is either not current on the register, or the register may reflect some sort of dispute that is going on. What ends up happening is because of the chiefs that have ultimate control of the land, because of what is stool and skin rights, they have a local working establishment of who owns the land and the understanding of who actually is in control, but those are not legally recognized verifications of ownership. What we're trying to do is bridge the gap between the chiefs and the government and the people, so that what ends up happening is the chiefs who have control of the land work with us as a ombuds person or proxy for the government, so that they don't have to have direct interaction. And this way, because we're an agnostic, apolitical party, no one can come to us and say we're working with any specific side or political party to try to malign our organization or, for lack of better words, use that against us to say a reason not to work with our organization, because ultimately we are working to build a digital infrastructure that can protect populations that are at risk, the most rural populations that don't have government infrastructure currently servicing them. We are coming up with ways to access these populations and then build the digital and physical infrastructure needed to service them. Moving on. So in Ghana, the Lands Commission was established in 1992. The Lands Commission has been working very hard to try to implement these solutions across the country in many different ways, trying everything from trying to get a unified physical device that people can use to access a market, or having multiple notaries stationed around the country. I believe there are about 38 notaries specifically set up to document land titles. However, when it came to instituting these policies, they ran into many problems, and it was not able to manifest in a unified ledger. So ultimately, what the government is doing is looking for pilot projects to try to solve this problem, and this is where Bitland has come in to try to establish a protocol and infrastructure that can solve this issue in Ghana specifically, but as well what we're learning from working in the worst and most rural areas, we can take and apply to the best case scenarios, and ultimately these Ghanaian pilot projects can be informative to the rest of the Bitland projects. Going forward, we can look at the effects of land title disputes. What ends up happening when you cannot settle land title disputes is that the exchange of property comes to a screeching halt. People cannot use property as equity. They cannot take out loans against their land. They can't use it for building businesses in the sense of taking out business loans to establish new sources of income. So internally, communities can suffer from rifts where people will start to challenge each other verbally, or comes to the point where it actually comes to physical altercations, and there are many actual conflicts that arise from what were initially land title disputes. So when you look at major disputes that have dissolved into civil wars, at the core it may have been a land title dispute that was the initial problem that started the ongoing chaos. Next. As we look to lay the foundation in Ghana, what we're trying to do is establish multiple protocols that will give us different approaches to using the different types of infrastructures to see what works best in which scenarios. Because what we're trying to recognize as well is that all cultures are absolutely not equal. And in this, we have to respect each culture moving into where we're trying to approach as implementing these policies. What we are doing is using Mauritius, Nigeria, Kenya, Botswana, and Ghana as our varying test grounds to see what in different socioeconomic scenarios, the different approaches we can take to using capital and distributing capital to make the system and infrastructure as efficient and as economically viable as possible. What we're doing is using what is the decentralized conglomerate theory to take the best of traditional conglomerates and the best of decentralized theory, which is a broad application not just from blockchain technology, but actually decentralizing authority over capital, whether it's distributing voting, or in the case of something like an electoral college, moving power from the top more to the bottom of the population chain. So, in effect, what we're trying to do is establish more micro economies in the larger context of a macro globalizing chain. Moving on. In Ghana, we have had the cooperation of 28 communities to start from scratch to see what kind of initiatives work, what does not work, to get the people in the community involved with the project. At the end of the day, all technology is a function of the people that use it. So what we're trying to do is make sure that every step of the process, the people that are working with us are informed, and they're also informing us as to how we apply our changes and how we move to implement the next stages of our technology. What we've learned in this process is that as long as we listen to the people and as long as we show that everything we do is reflecting being informed by their opinions and their situations, we've had very little problems getting progress moving forward, because at the end of the day, every time the people cooperate with us, we make progress. And this is where the ability to show progress has made us recepted very well everywhere we go. At the core of what we're trying to do, we end up not having to ask people to go into their countries because they asked us to come. And this makes it much easier to establish a working relationship everywhere we're moving with Bitland. Moving forward. Behind Bitland, we have a broad, basic blockchain technology that is not a unified approach to establishing anything that is a digital ledger. Many people have heard of Bitcoin, some people have heard of Ethereum. Bitland is actually using a blockchain which is called BitShares to be the backbone of our digital infrastructure. What we did was we built a cadastral token to represent the Bitland transactions on top of the BitShares network. What this does is establishes a security layer around our blockchain, which would first need to be hacked in order to access our blockchain. And then the cadastral token represents the Bitland blockchain on which only transactions related to Bitland take place. Now, the reason we did this is because what happens when you put all the transactions in one place is that they overload the chain. And one of the main problems that's affecting Bitcoin right now is having every single transaction in one place is contrary to the actual ability to analyze information. So we have refined our focus of our blockchain, and our blockchain is only going to be focused on transactions that have to do with land titles and Bitland specifically. So in this process, we're able to establish smart land titles which have access to the person who is in control of a land deed, the government which is overseeing the legal verification of a title, and in the case of somewhere like Ghana, the chief who is needed to verify that the transaction gets his approval or her approval, where those types of approvals are needed traditionally just to make sure that the transaction can take place. Now, making this as easy as possible can reduce the time in which it takes to exchange a land title And not only that, establishing a digital chain of custody and digital chain of approval will make sure that there is little chance to corrupt a process of establishing the correct ownership of something, whether it's a short-term tenure or a permanent tenure. Moving on. In the context of establishing...
In the interest of time, could you keep it a bit short?
Oh, sure. In the context of establishing
Thank you.
analytic methods, the blockchain establishes new ways to keep track of data and make sure that everything is transparent. One example would be through taxation, where you can track everything that is coming through the transaction chain, whether it's taxes or expenditures. Next, moving on. We're using the Mauritius example of Cyber City of Ben to inform the way we move towards the upper scale or higher developed Bitland implementations, as in places like Nigeria you have very wide range of socioeconomic areas where some are the most high scale metropolitan areas, and then you have some places where it's rural and there's no government infrastructure. So we're trying to make sure that we move in both places at the same time to establish a connection that dissolves friction between moving between the lower class areas and upper class areas, in the process raising the standards of living for everyone. Moving on. What we're trying to do is use the micro community approach to establishing economic diversity to have more varying economic what would be in the context of a biodiversity approach to economics, more resilient communities that will not suffer extinction level events such as has happened in the recession in the United States. So moving forward, we have the way to allow protection of public lands, establish economic development that is benefiting local ownership, also allowing foreign direct investment. Next, we also have social media and tourism that can track transactions, whether it's an actual movement of a meme through social media to establish the responsibility and awards to the proper people, and in effect reduce friction for tourism so people are using the reward systems that can be established to promote tourism in areas that like Lagos or Nairobi that people may not necessarily be inclined to think of to visit first. Moving forward, the economic opportunities that are presented by the new technology allow areas like Mauritius to become blockchain hubs that will establish technological hubs that promote job growth, but also allow interconnectivity between people and countries on a global scale. Next, the Mauritius Africa Fund has been established to distribute funds across Africa in investment to make sure that the banks that are within Africa are investing in the local economies. Moving forward, what we're trying to do is establish a backbone over which the Mauritius Africa Fund can be distributed and make sure that all the transactions are transparent, and also this will accelerate development and growth, but also ensure that the process is as least corruptible as possible. And finally, Bitland has registered its first official property in Ghana on the blockchain. So this has been a long-standing process where we started on a dirt road and now we're actually putting properties on the blockchain in Ghana. What this represents is establishing a digital connection between a property and a latitude and longitude, and this is something that Google has not even been able to do in this area. So finally, with the smart communities, what we're trying to do is establish digital and physical infrastructures over which economic development can be accelerated, but as well it can be made into a reward system process over which everyone benefits and we can hit a Nash equilibrium as a globe. Thank you very much.
Dude, you're off. Good to go. We're good to go.
Do we need questions or anything?
Thanks, buddy. It was really cool. It was really cool. Just a moment. Just not for a moment. Just hold on for a moment, okay?
No problem. It's funny because.
It was a perfect presentation. The only thing is we run out of time. Yeah.
Thank you, man. Thanks for letting me know.
And it
Um,
perfect synchronization. You were exactly able to go through the same slides and everything, so it was really good.
awesome.